So let's talk about the Internet of Things. Is it something that's actually going to add value to people's lives, or a geeky software plot to add defects to the physical world? We're working on the former. I've been accused of the latter, mostly by my wife, who has wondered as we've gone through this evolution or this journey at SmartThings, sometimes why the lights are coming on and going off in the kitchen, and she doesn't understand that's because I've added an application that's making them turn on and off, and she says, stop it. So what is it? What is the Internet of Things? The Oxford English Dictionary actually recently added the term Internet of Things to their dictionary, and I heard about this and I was excited to see what they had said. And so they defined it as, and I'm going to have to walk over here where I can read it, a proposed development of the Internet in which everyday objects have network connectivity, allowing them to send and receive data. And I have to tell you, I was singularly disappointed with this definition, because I was trying to figure out, well, what objects that connect to the Internet don't send and receive data? You know, is that really illuminating the definition of the Internet of Things to say that, oh, well, you can connect something to the Internet and it will send and receive data? And I thought, well, that isn't really telling you much. And then they went on, unfortunately, to use it in a sentence, right? As dictionaries are wont to do, they'll define it and then they'll use the term in a sentence. And here's what they said in a sentence. If one thing can prevent the Internet of Things from transforming the way we live and work, it will be a breakdown in security. And I thought, well, thanks. Like, not helping my cause, right? That the only thing that they could think of to say about the Internet of Things in using it in a sentence was that security is a problem. So as you can imagine, we have a little bit of a different view at SmartThings. And if you don't know who SmartThings is, I'm not surprised. We're still a fairly young company. We've only been around for 18 months. That said, in 18 months, we've built a consumer platform for the Internet of Things. It is compatible with literally hundreds, approaching thousands of off-the-shelf consumer devices that you can use with our platform. And what we're trying to do is to make the Internet of Things, to make realizing the vision of using connected devices to actually solve problems a reality, and to do that in a way that is, I'm not trying to offend anybody with this if there are any grandmas in the audience, but to do that in a way that is grandma easy, right? That anyone should be able to do this, right? It shouldn't be the world of firmware developers and hackers and makers, right? It shouldn't take that kind of skill set to be able to use the Internet of Things. That said, there is this huge focus in the tech press and even the popular press on the Internet of Things and what it's going to mean. And everyone focuses on how many things can we connect, right? 50 billion by 2020. You know, Cisco, same thing, 50 billion by 2020. 100 billion connected devices in 10 years. That was a couple of years ago that they said that. IDC has the biggest projection so far, 212 connected devices by the year 2020. That's 30 devices for every man, woman, and child on the planet. And I can tell you that you know, this may fall into the category, as we are wont to do in the technology industry, of overestimating how quickly things will change in the short term and underestimating how much they're going to change in the long term. Do I think we'll get to 212 billion connected devices by 2020? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Do I ultimately think there will be a lot more than that in terms of connected devices? Absolutely. There's another bit of research, a forecast by a group called the OECD, which is largely Western developed nations that does a lot of great research. And they said that in forecasting that in 2017, or actually they said today the average household has 8 to 10 connected devices. Now, they're talking about everything from your phone to your tablet. They're not talking about light switches necessarily. But 8 to 10 connected devices today. They're forecasting 25 connected devices by 2017 and 50 connected devices by the year 2020. So I thought we should look at what that means. You know, what are they saying we're going to have in our lives at those different points? And today it's predominantly, you know, tablets and your phones. Your cable and DSL modem is something they even include in that as a connected device, which technically it is, even though it doesn't. It's kind of transparent to the consumer. But let's look at it. What it's going to look like in 2017. They're talking about, of course, more smartphones, more laptops, more tablets. They start to include things like your television set, your set-top boxes, e-readers, your smart meter. I'm from California, and you know, of course, we have 80 million smart meters in the state now, right? Everybody has a smart meter in their home. We haven't actually figured out why they're so smart or what they're doing for us, but they're there. At the moment, all they're really doing is keeping the guy from having to walk around with the little you know, thing and spot and look and see what your meter says. But as you can see here, you know, it's even in this time frame, it's still predominantly consumer electronics devices. It's not really doing a lot from a home automation perspective. And then by the year 2020, you start to see other things come in. You know, quantified self. Home automation, sensors, pay-as-you-go drive devices that monitor your driving habits and allow you to pay for insurance as you drive, an intelligent thermostat. And so by 2020, they're saying 45 to 50 of these devices. I think that's very reasonable within certain demographics that we're going to get to this point. My house right now looks like this. Okay, so I'm clearly you know, on the leading edge here. I'm an early adopter of these technologies. I have a lot of connected devices in my house. You know, 36 passive home sensors, motion, contact, temperature, accelerometers, just monitoring stuff all over the house, and randomly turning on the lights and making my wife crazy. But it's 132 connected devices. And I get asked this question all the time. How many devices do you have in your house? Because there is this odd focus on how many devices are connected. And I guess it makes a sort of sense because it's an indicator of scale. But what I want to challenge everybody to think of is that it's actually not an indicator of any kind of value. Right? 132 connected devices in my house doesn't necessarily tell me anything about the value that I'm getting or not getting out of this solution, right? What is more interesting is that in my home, while I have 132 connected devices, I have 48 different applications installed into my house. And that's part of how the SmartThings platform works, that just like you go to the App Store on your iOS or Android device and you find an app and you install it, this is how SmartThings works. You find an app in our catalog and you install it into your house. It doesn't actually work that way. You know, I don't have one of Chris's Nebula clouds in my house to run all this stuff. We actually do take advantage of services like Amazon to run all of this, but I have, logically speaking, 48 different applications installed into my house, and they're in various categories, from home and family, so keeping track of the comings and goings of family members, and automating around that, right? When everyone leaves, the house can respond to things like that, because now it knows that, in fact, everyone left. Categories like doors and locks, really pedestrian types of things. You know when the door is open, know when the door is closed, lock and unlock it, you know, automatically based on whether people are home or not home or what time of day it is. And it sounds pretty simple, and yet when you think about it, you know, the front door as we know it, the door to our homes, actually hasn't changed in several thousand years. You know, it hasn't. At some point we went from like a big bolt kind of lock that someone had to throw to an actual key lock, right? And once we invented the key, that was it. That was the end of innovation around the door until now. And now we're starting to think about, right, how do we innovate around the door and around keys? And you may have seen, there's actually, there have been a number of demos done recently where someone would take a picture of a key, send it to someone. They would use a 3D printer to print a copy of the key and then actually be able to go and use that 3D printed key to unlock something, right? So you can, what you should get out of this is that actual keys are actually not very secure. If you think they are, you're fooling yourself. And that actually maybe there's an opportunity to innovate around things like doors and locks with technology to actually make them more secure and not less. So categories like doors and locks, comfort, keeping the environment at the right temperature, whether I'm home, whether I'm not, things like the Nest Learning Thermostat, but there are others in this space working on automating these types of things. Here's another area where my wife, and especially because I live in California and the weather is nice all the time, my wife's idea of climate control in the house is to put the thermostat on 80 degrees and hold for the summertime, and then 70 degrees and hold for the wintertime. So that is climate management in my house. I have 3 intelligent thermostats in the house. None of them actually get used for anything. So. And I'm going to make a point about that in a second that should resonate with everybody. Of course, things like lights and switches, you want to be able to automate the lights. In my house, every light switch has actually been replaced with something that is controllable, so that I don't have to touch the switches. Oddly, in order to achieve my vision of not having to touch the switches, I had to replace all the switches. And it makes you wonder, right? Will we get to the point where we will build homes that actually don't have switches on the wall, right? Should we be challenging assumptions like this, right? That, oh, well, of course you need switches on the wall. Well, why, right? In fact, why do I need a thermostat on the wall? I mean, Nest wants you to have a thermostat on the wall. I get that, but why do I actually want this thing on the wall at all? Right? It's pretty, it looks great, but do I actually need a thermostat on the wall in order to control comfort? Lights and switches, damages and dangers. We're going to talk a little bit about this one later. It's a super important category, we believe. And the point here is that in my home, there are a lot of middle of the bell curve types of applications that would be applicable to all of you, right? That they're right in the middle of the bell curve. Everybody needs these. At the same time, there are edge cases, right? There are long tail use cases that don't necessarily apply to everyone. Like automatically feeding the dog. I have an internet connected pet feeder, right? You actually can buy this. The one I have is not the one that's on the market, because the one I have is actually one that one of our engineers took and hacked together to make it connected to our service. So I have a one-off device, and you should not be surprised by that the fact that in my house I have lots of these kind of hacked together devices and things that aren't yet available to the mass market. So I have a pet feeder that will feed the dog. I have the tag on the dog's collar that will tell me if the dog leaves the yard, which is important because we actually have an electric fence. Right? And so the dog, there's nothing physical that keeps the dog in the yard except for the little shock that he gets when he gets close to the electric fence. But every now and then the batteries in that device run down, and so I've got another device to tell me that, in fact, he's gone. So that I can run after him. Unfortunately, it's not a GPS tracker yet, so I can't actually know where he went. I just know he's gone. Clearly, there's room for improvement in that. I have an app that enforces a television allowance on my kids. So they get 2 hours a week. I don't care whether it's one of them watching the TV or all of them. They need to collaborate in order to make the best use of that 2 hours. It enforces that across multiple televisions in the house, so that you can't cheat it by watching this TV and then going over here and watching a different television. Maybe that is mainstream, I guess, for people who have kids. I have an app that tells me when my wife is somewhere that's important to me, like the grocery store, right? I'll get a notification. Amy's at the grocery store, and I can say, aha, I can text her and say, I need this, and I need this, and I need this. I have an app through a device called Emojio, moj.io, that reminds me when my car is low on gas, so that I don't forget in a morning where I'm having to go somewhere that I actually need to allow time to stop and get gas. And that's it's a telematics device, a consumer telematics device that you can plug into the diagnostic port in your car. It's cellular connected. They're integrating with our cloud. All sorts of cool data coming in from that. I'm very much looking forward to when my oldest daughter turns 16 in 4 years. She will have Emojio in her car that will track where she is, how fast she's driving. It'll tell me whether she's going over the speed limit or not. It'll let me set a geographic area that she's allowed to drive in, and if she goes outside of that boundary, I'll get a notification. All sorts of cool things coming in the consumer telematics space, and there's Emojio is not the only one. there are a number of companies that are working on that. And then finally, I have a sensor that monitors the temperature in my wife's greenhouse, which is about 100 yards behind the house, actually. But I've got a temperature sensor out there that integrates with our system to monitor that temperature, so that if she forgets to go and open the greenhouse up when she should, and it's getting too hot in there, she'll get a notification. So the point of all this is there are a number of points, right? Number one, connected devices don't equal value. Right? I could have 1 million connected devices in my house, you know, with the like the sugar packet of little nanobots that, you know, go out into the house and automate things, and that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to get value out of that. So solving real-world problems is what translates into value. And arguably, you know, there are little problems, and then there are big problems. And in our case, what that means is that installed applications translate into some kind of value, most of them. There are certainly cases where I install an app, I have an idea about something, and I install an app to do something, to set up some kind of automation, and then I realize now that's, you know, just like you install an app on your phone, and, you know, a couple of days later you're like, yeah, no, delete, right? So the same thing happens in the physical world. I install an app, I try it out, nah, it's not really adding value, I delete it. But as importantly, my world and your world, everyone's world, are very different, right? My home is different than yours. And so while I do have these things that are in the middle of the bell curve, I have lots of long-tail applications as well. And ultimately, making this useful to consumers is not just about solving those mainstream use cases. It is about giving you the tools that you need to solve for the edge cases, to solve for the long tail of use cases. We have a customer who lives in Dallas, Texas. If you've ever been to Dallas, they have hellacious thunderstorms. Right? When you have thunder and lightning in Dallas, there's no missing it. You know it. And this person has a dog that is very afraid of the thunder and lightning. And so they have an app that integrates with our virtual weather station to get severe weather alerts. And when there's a severe weather alert in that person's geography, in their zip code, it automatically turns on some lights, because the dog is in a crate while this person's at work, turns on some lights, and turns on some music, right, so that the dog won't be afraid because the severe weather is coming. Because they've been through this multiple times where they come home and the dog is traumatized because of the weather, right? And so, you know, that's a very, very long tail use case, right? No one is ever going to build a company around that, right? I don't even know what you'd call it. You know, avoid neuroses in your dog.com or something. I don't know. So, you know, solving for the long tail is super important, and everyone is different. And I think what that leads us to is hopefully a better definition of the Internet of Things. An evolutionary development of the Internet in which software applications can easily, and I'm going to talk more about this later, can easily make use of connected everyday objects in order to solve real-world problems. Right? That feels like a better definition to us of the Internet of Things. And let's use it in a sentence, since the dictionary did. The Internet of Things will transform the way in which we live and work by making our lives safer, smarter, and more productive. Right? Now that feels like a bit more optimistic view of the world than what the Oxford English Dictionary. I sent this to them. They haven't done anything with it yet. So let's look at some more serious use cases. Let's look at some areas where, you know, we can add even more value than telling me when the dog is missing. Now, don't get me wrong, that is valuable to me, right? Because I do care about the dog. I want to know if he's gone, especially because where I live in Southern California, there are lots of coyotes, right? So when the dog is missing, he's in danger. But there are arguably some more serious things that we can do from an Internet of Things perspective. So what if you were automatically told when your toddler opened the cabinet that you keep the household chemicals in, and you were able to get to your toddler and stop him immediately and avoid a trip to the emergency room, one of the 300 trips a day to the emergency room that happen in this country because of toddlers being poisoned with home chemicals. Right? 10,000 kids a year end up in the emergency room. It's a problem worth solving. What if your house detected a water leak behind your washing machine and automatically turned off the water to prevent damage because you're not home? So even if I could notify you, right, you know, if I can't turn the water off, all that's going to do is tell you that you've got a big problem and you're not there to solve it. So, you know, we need to detect the water, but we also need to automatically turn it off. And oh, by the way, you know, it could also ask you if you wanted to call a plumber and schedule the appointment to get the plumber out there to fix the source of the problem. What if a wearable medical tricorder watch could diagnose a heart attack in progress and automatically call the EMTs and guide them to your location? Even better, what if it could tell me, you know, even before the heart attack, you know, gee, there's something not right here. You really need to go, you know, go to the doctor, go to the hospital. What if your house detected smoke in the upstairs hallway in the middle of the night? This is all of our worst nightmare, especially if you're a parent. And, you know, sounded the alarm to tell everybody in the house there was a fire, along with voice instructions to tell everyone where the fire was and where they should go, what they should be doing, while automatically notifying the fire department and turning on the lights and unlocking all the doors, right? Which, wow, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Because you're actually going to need to be able to see in the middle of the night in order to get out of the house. And you don't want anybody, especially a child, you know, not being able to get out because the door is locked and they can't figure out how to unlock it. While simultaneously publishing a map of, and keeping updated, a map of occupied spaces in the home to first responders so that they know when they get there if there's anybody left in the home. Right? It makes you realize when you start to think about some of these scenarios how, you know, how really crude some of the technologies we have today are. Oh, the smoke detector is going to go off and it's going to make a really loud noise. Great, you know, but how does that really help me from that point forward to know what to do and how to keep everybody safe? Well, it doesn't, right? Nest is actually moving in this direction, of course, because their latest smoke detector has a motion sensor built in, right? So they can try to understand motion in the house when something like that happens, and of course they get to use the motion sensor at other times as well, so that's cool. What if grandma's house detected that she had fallen in the middle of the night? 250,000 broken hips in people over the age of 65 in this country every year, right? So grandma falling down in the middle of the night, sorry to say, not an unusual use case, right? This happens all the time. So what if grandma falls in the middle of the night, the house detects that and calls for help while communicating with the EMTs on their way, monitoring her vital information, right? So, and talking to her, frankly, right? Everybody's seen Iron Man, right? My house is named Jarvis. It doesn't actually talk to me yet. We're working on that, but you know, I thought I'd go ahead and give it the name. What if your house notified you of a failure in your air conditioning system before it happened, right? Because, you know, the AC going out in the middle of the summer is so much fun. Maybe we could actually tell you, hey, there's like something's wrong here, right? It looks like something's going bad. You know, you need to have somebody look at this. But even better, why shouldn't the house call the HVAC company and get somebody out there to fix the air conditioning system? Even better, why can't the house just let them in and monitor their work while they're doing the repairs and test the system afterwards to make sure that they actually fixed it? Jarvis will be able to do this. What if your elderly father with Alzheimer's, newly diagnosed Alzheimer's, wore a GPS tracker and you were notified that he had deviated from his habitual kind of patterns, right? He's gone somewhere that he doesn't usually go because he was lost and he didn't know where he was, right? And you were able to go to that location and turn what could have been a potential disaster into a minor inconvenience. Right? These are real problems. The Internet of Things is not all about turning on the hot tub automatically when I leave work on a Friday afternoon, even though that's cool, right? What if your house detected a potential break-in while you were on vacation? And using facial recognition technology was able to recognize that it was your neighbor who was coming to check on the house at your request but had forgotten to de-arm the system to identify himself. And instead of notifying the police, which could have resulted in a bill, has anybody had this happen where you have a false alarm on a security system, the police come out and you actually end up getting a bill from the local police department for $100, $150, right, for the false alarm? Instead of notifying the police, it notified you that your neighbor had dropped by to make sure that everything was okay. These things and so much more are the real potential of the Internet of Things. These are the things that we're working on, not just SmartThings, but collectively with the universe of companies that are working on connected devices. At SmartThings, we don't actually build all the devices. In fact, we only build a couple, right? But we work with companies all over the world now that are trying to connect devices. And why do we work with them? Because the intelligence that we're talking about actually needs to be applied across all of these devices. And you as a consumer need to have a user experience that makes sense to you, that is unified. There are a number, for example, there are a number of connected light bulbs out on the market now. Philips Hue being the most popular one of those. There's another one coming out called LifeX. Sylvania is coming out with a connected bulb. Going to be lots of connected light bulbs. And I have this vision that we're trying to avoid, frankly, of a separate app on my phone for the Philips Hue bulb, and another one for the LifeX bulb, and another one for the Sylvania bulb, and on and on and on. And those are just the light bulbs, right? And so, you know, part of what we're trying to accomplish here is to create a single user experience that cuts across all of these devices. It doesn't mean that there isn't room for a specific application for specific use cases. That Mogio telematics sensor that I talked about that's in my car, you know, their application is best of breed. It does some very specific things. I don't want to compete with that, right? But I also want to make sure that I can get their data into our platform in order to do interesting things with. So, done correctly, the Internet of Things should actually support and improve our freedoms. It should make us safer. It should help us to be healthier. Don't eat that, right? The phone automatically detects what you're about to eat and says, stop. It should save time, right? Both in the consumer world, but certainly in the business world, right? The Internet of Things, I think, has a huge potential to save time. It should save money, right? Same thing, everywhere. It should reduce waste. Has anybody heard the statistic that a third of all food on this planet actually is wasted, right? Seems like an opportunity to me, right? Lots and lots of supply chain management applications for the Internet of Things in order to reduce waste. It should allow for extreme personalization of your individual experience in your home, in your car, on your body, extreme personalization. It should improve your control over the environment. And it should do a lot of things in an automated way that simply respond to you. My point about the light switches and wanting to get rid of the light switches on the wall is that the best kind of automation or the best kind of applications of the Internet of Things are the kinds that simply happen around you. They don't require you to push a button on your phone. All right? They certainly don't require you to push a light switch on the wall. They should give us greater choice. I'm going to talk more about this in a bit as well. But the Internet of Things should actually expand our ability to choose, not limit it. And you think, wow, Jeff, that sounds great. What could possibly go wrong? Some people have concerns. The Oxford English Dictionary being one of them, right? Security is going to be the thing that we need to worry about, right? Okay, maybe it's not Skynet, you know, and the artificial intelligence taking over the planet quite yet. But there are concerns, security concerns, privacy concerns. So let's talk for a few minutes about those. Now, our belief is that the benefits of the Internet of Things will certainly outweigh the risks. But there are some things that we have to do, you know, as an industry in order to make that happen. Number one, we need to make sure that our things in an Internet of Things world are secure from unauthorized access. Now, what does that mean? Right? Well, certainly it means that you know, the hacker can't unlock my front door, right? That seems important. But it's actually way more nuanced than that, right? Obviously, we need to protect against hackers. At SmartThings, though, what we've actually built is a platform for software developers, right? We're not going to write all those apps that I have installed in my house. We don't write those. You know, you guys write those. Developers write those. And if you're writing an app, right, that's going to live in my house, I'm going to install it in my house, how do I make sure that that app that you write doesn't do something wonky like, you know, if you direct message me on Facebook, unlock the front door, right? And you could, you know, someone could try to do that because apps that you write on our platform can talk to web services. It's important. You need to be able to do that. So how do we deal with that? We deal with that by, number one, and unfortunately for us, we actually deal with that by being required to do a source code level review on all the apps. So this is not like the iOS App Store where you can publish something, you know, send it to Apple, they do a review, they publish it. I make that sound easy. It's actually not that easy. But you know, but they don't do a source code review of your app. And unfortunately, in an Internet of Things world, we actually have to do that. We have to make sure that you're not doing something, you know, something nefarious in an application that's going to be installed into someone's home. We have to make sure that the app itself can only access the devices and the data that you as the consumer authorize it to access. So if the application needs access to the front door to unlock it or lock it, and a one or more presence sensors to know if somebody's home or not, this is a presence sensor in case you're wondering, right? Your phone in your pocket. Then you as the consumer have to authorize that access. Yes, this app can unlock my front door, or maybe it can lock my front door but not unlock my front door, right? So I have to be very granular. And once you've given those permissions to the app, that's it. That's the security context of that application. It can access those devices and only those devices. So our things being secure, you know, doesn't just mean secure from hackers. It means secure from applications or intelligence that you would add across those devices, but it also means secure from unintended consequences. Somebody published a hack a while back that demonstrated that, in fact, you could use the APIs on the Belkin Wemo to start a fire by toggling it on and off rapidly enough, right? Eventually, the device will overheat and spark and start a fire, right? Platforms like ours need to actually help guard against cases like this, right? With control theory and the ability to actually understand, hey, that's not something that we want to allow someone to do with an electric switch. It's a bad idea. And sometimes those things, by the way, can happen unintentionally, right? I install one app that's turning a light on given a certain set of circumstances, and my wife installs an app that's turning the light off in the same set of circumstances, and now they're competing with each other, right? Things like that could happen if you don't guard against those from a platform perspective. Next one, the data about our things is ours. As consumers, the data that comes from all of these devices is yours. It's your data. They're your devices. It's your data. You will give permission in certain circumstances for companies like mine to use the data in order to deliver the service that we deliver back to you, right? We have to have access to it in order to make these apps work, so we have to be able to get at the data. You might also choose to give permission to others to access the data, but it's your data. You should be able to see it, delete it, back it up, do whatever you want with it. It's your data. By the way, there's a lot of it. You may not want all this data. We have about 7,000 current households. So we're, again, still very young company. We have about 7,000 homes using our product today. Those 7,000 homes generate 120 million discrete data points a day. It's a lot of data. My house is about 175,000 data points a day just coming out of my house, right? Most of which is not valuable, right? It's things like the contact sensor on the front door every 2 minutes saying, I'm still here, still here, right? Or front door still closed, right? And arguably, there's not much value in that data. There's a huge opportunity for compression and deduplication of that data over time. But you know, it's interesting to measure. 120 million events a day coming out of 7,000 homes. And when you think about what that's going to look like at scale, right? 1 million homes, 10 million homes, 100 million homes, it's a lot of data, right? Chris Kemp and his cloud computing stuff is going to be really important, right, in order to be able to handle the scale of all this and keep up with it. Our data is private unless explicitly shared. So yes, it's your data. It needs to be kept private. You will determine whether someone has access to it. But there are some really interesting cases and really valuable cases, right? Do you want to share that medical tricorder data automatically with your family physician? That seems like, you know, that could be really valuable. Do you want your family physician to know automatically that, hey, your 2-year-old actually in the middle of the night, you know, is now running 104-degree fever, right? Okay. Do I want my lawn care company to automatically have the data about the moisture of the moisture sensors in my yard and to be able to remotely control my sprinkler system? Yeah, I don't want to do that. You take care of that, right? So there are lots of cases where the data is really quite interesting. And of course, our vision for the future is one in which those 48 applications that I have installed in my house, most of those I shouldn't even need to install because the system should actually learn my behaviors and automatically figure out what those applications are, right? If I come home every day after work and I walk in the back and I turn on the kitchen lights and turn on the Sonos music system to my favorite Pandora station, and I do that 3 or 4 times in a row, the house, Jarvis, should just figure that out, right? And it should just start happening. Or he should ask me, hey, do you want, like, you seem to do this every day, do you want it to happen automatically? Intelligence needs to be decoupled from devices in order to reduce costs, improve consumer choice, and increase flexibility. What do I mean by this? The Internet of Things should not be a recipe for building hyper-expensive devices. And I'm going to pick on Nest a little bit, right? A $200+ thermostat, which at its core, at the end of the day, when all of the self-learning algorithms and all that stuff is done, that thermostat does 4 things. Call for heat, call for air, turn the fan on and off, and off. That's all a thermostat does. Right? So if I decouple the intelligence from that thermostat, I love self-learning thermostats, right? I love self-learning algorithms and machine learning. It's all great stuff, right? But if I decouple that from the thermostat, what happens? Number one, the thermostat gets cheaper, right? I don't need all that horsepower in the thermostat. Number two, it gives me more choice. If I don't like the climate management app that I have installed into my house today, and I see a better one in the catalog, yeah, I'll go buy a better one. I'll go buy a new learning thermostat app and install it in my house and let it try to do a better job, right? It gives me more choice as a consumer if you decouple the intelligence, because now I can buy the devices and then make choices over time about what intelligence I want to apply to those devices. So our belief is that we need to decouple intelligence from devices so that we can keep the cost of devices as low as we can possibly get them and improve consumer choice by allowing you to then decide, right, which apps am I going to install into my house. It obviously has to be highly reliable and available. Some things will happen in the home. Some things are going to happen in the cloud. I don't have the horsepower, and I never will probably in your home, to apply machine learning algorithms to all of the data coming out of your home and figure out, well, what should I be doing automatically? I need to apply the supercomputing power of the cloud in order to solve problems like that. And it's going to make the physical world programmable. Not just by firmware engineers and makers who can do cool things with Arduino boards and technologies like that, but by just about anyone. By any web developer who can program in Ruby or PHP or Python or whatever language you want to program in, but even by power users who can just use a simple rule builder to create their own apps for their home. Because we've got to solve for those long tail use cases. And as a developer, when you write apps for the physical world, we don't believe that you should have to know anything at all about how devices connect, how they actually work, what protocols, is it Bluetooth, is it Zigbee, is it Z-Wave, is it Wi-Fi, right? What's the Zigbee command class in order to lock the door? Well, who cares, right? As a developer, I don't want to know those things. I want the platform to solve that for me so that as a developer, I can say things like door.lock and have the physical world respond to that, because that allows me to now write an application in minutes. I'll give you an example. The example that I used earlier, right? I want to be able to detect the presence of people either with their smartphone or using our little presence tag like I have on the dog's collars. I actually have those on my kids' backpacks as well. I want to be able to detect presence, and when somebody comes home, I want to unlock the door, and when everyone leaves, I want to lock the door. How many developers do we have in the audience? A lot, okay. You can imagine that, this is actually a non-trivial problem to solve, right? If I handed you a bunch of, even if I handed you the door lock, right, and said, hey, here's a Z-Wave door lock, and here's the SDK for iOS so that you can learn how to do geofencing on iOS. How long would it take you to solve that problem? Right? A long time. Right? It's a non-trivial problem. With our platform and with the abstraction that we provide, where now instead of worrying about how I talk to devices, all I have to do is understand what capabilities they have, right? And all locks actually have a minimum capability of lock and unlock, They frequently have more. And in our platform, I could literally solve that problem in less than 5 minutes. I could write that app in less than 5 minutes to say, when everyone's home, when people come home, lock the doors, or unlock the doors. Once people are home, lock the doors. When people leave, lock the doors again to make sure that the house stays secure. And so our vision of the Internet of Things is that we've got to make this stupid easy for everybody, for developers, for makers, for the end consumer as well. And part of what we'll do that is by being completely open. I want to be able to connect anyone's device to our platform, right? I want to we have opened up our platform so that anyone can connect to it and use our APIs in order to integrate with and do whatever you need to do in a very secure way. And we could spend days on the security of the Internet of Things. There's a lot there. But openness is an important thing, and it comes back to that idea of consumer choice. We need to keep things open. As a manufacturer of a product, I don't want to have to make a bet about whether that product is going to get used with SmartThings or some other platform that's going to apply the intelligence. I want to be able to manufacture that product and know that the platform providers are simply going to support it and be open and be able to integrate it. And in fact, with our platform, we don't even have to be involved in the integrations. You can integrate new devices into the SmartThings platform, and you don't even have to talk to us, which can get interesting, as you can imagine, right? Because all of a sudden we can see a brand new device that comes online, and all of a sudden it's sending 1,000 events in 10 seconds, right? And our operations team goes, wow, that's interesting. Like, what is that, right? And also, as you can imagine, we reach out and say, what are you doing? Why are you sending 1,000 events in 10 seconds? Operationally, it's a big challenge. But all of this ease of use for developers and ease of use for consumers and the ability to write that app that I described in less than 5 minutes, what's important about that is that all of this leads to rapid innovation and an entirely new way of solving problems. Because when I can look at the physical world and I can look at a set of devices and I can think about those devices in terms of their capabilities and what data do they report, and I can quickly jump into an environment like ours and write a new application that solves a real problem, maybe not in 5 minutes, maybe it's longer, but I can solve a real problem quickly and easily without having to understand all the nitty-gritty details about how those devices connect. I can do it without having to know that, in fact, that the cloud environment that my application is running in is geographically load balanced so that if one data center fails, everything will just keep on working. I don't need to know those things. And what that means is that I can innovate on the value. I can innovate on solving a real-world problem and bringing that to my customer, whether that's a consumer customer or a business customer. And hopefully, at that point, we start to see different headlines out of the tech press and out of the popular press, that instead of focusing on the number of connected devices, because as we've said, that doesn't mean value, that we'll start to see some headlines like, 100,000 children saved from accidental poisoning, or 20% reduction in energy consumption worldwide because we simply got better at turning off stuff that doesn't need to be on. Or home insurance claims down 15% for customers using next-generation home automation simply by solving for the case that I talked about earlier, where you have a flood inside the house, which, by the way, is the #2 category of claims in all of home insurance. It costs billions of dollars every year. Or the average assisted care age was delayed by 3 years because now we've provided tools for families to provide continuous monitoring of elderly and give them more independence longer before they require assisted living. Right? This is what the headlines should really look like. And the result is that we'll get to a point where we talk about not an Internet of Things, but an Internet of human things. Thank you.